Welcome to the Felt Dyslexic Artist Interview. My name is Liz Buckridge. For me, as a dyslexic artist, other artists and creatives have always been my number one inspiration. In these interviews, we talk with artists and creatives who share their stories, and we gain insight into their process from inspiration to art tips, career building, and more. We're so lucky to listen to the wisdom of Susan Petree today. I'm so excited to hear about her past and future projects and her insights on life as an artist. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for talking with us today.
Thanks for coming.
I'm going to jump right in. Describe the art you make. What mediums do you primarily work in, and why do you choose those mediums?
So I'm an abstract expressionist artist, I guess would be the term. I work primarily with mixed media, acrylic paint, but then added to that are all sorts of mark making tools and paper and sometimes fabrics and putting other things into my art. Sometimes I work in oil and cold wax medium, which is a totally different kind of process for me. So it changes my art quite a bit with the mixed media. I end up using paint brushes, and so my scribbling and mark making gets very sort of frenetic, which is part of who I am. And then with the cold wax, you actually scrape on layers of paint, so it's a much slower, it's a much different kind of process. So you can always tell my oil and cold wax paintings versus my mixed media.
Wow. Do you work in any other mediums?
Just those two primarily. But I also change up the substrate or so I work on canvas. I work on I like working on wood panels. Sometimes, and I'm about to start a whole new series of paper paintings. I love working on paper. The only problem with it is that you have to frame it, so it ends up costing money.
How did you get into making art? Can you tell us about your background and how you first became interested in art?
Oh, it's a great story, actually. I tell it all the time. I was a banker in New York. I had done it for over 30 years, and I had never done any art in my life except for maybe a little painting class here or there. I used to do a lot of needlepoint and that kind of crafty kinds of things, but I never had done any art. And some friends of mine who lived in Jamestown, Rhode Island, called me and said, "Do you want to go to on a road trip with us?" They were driving from Austin, Texas to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I said, and then I thought, why not? I was really sort of fed up with work. And so I went off with them for and ended up in Santa Fe and was going in and out of galleries and studios. And I walked into this woman's studio and I started talking to her and I said, "So how long have you been in Santa Fe?" And she said, "I've been here a year. I came here to teach, actually." And I said, "Teach what?" She said, "I can teach anybody to do abstract." And I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And she had time, and my friends and we went for a 3-hour workshop with doing abstract art. And I went back to New York and quit my job and put my apartment on the market and said, "I'm going to become a painter." This is crazy, I know, but I was ready. I was just ready to try something new. I call it my second act because I'd never done it. I turned my second bedroom into a sort of a little studio, but the paint was flying, so I had plastic on the floors and all over the walls. And I was going in, and I spent all day in there, just paint flying. And then the studio, my apartment sold, and I thought, "Well, where the hell do I go now?" And the friends in Jamestown said, "Well, why don't you move to Newport?" So I moved to Newport, and that's where the whole thing started. And that was 13 years ago, and I've been painting ever since.
Wow.
And I tell that story a lot because it is a story people should hear, that you can start, you know, you don't have to be in your box. You can break out of it, you know.
Yeah, I appreciate it. How did you get into your specific style? Well, I guess you kind of told us a little bit, with that first teacher you had in Santa Fe, but like what themes or subjects inspire your work is the second half of this question, but I really want to know how you got into your specific style because I'm sure that teacher, like you changed from whatever she
Oh, yeah, yeah. You know, and my style continues to change. So it's an evolution, and it's a sort of everything sort of pushes you in a different direction. But when I first started, of course, I didn't know what I was doing. There are a lot of artists, especially ones who've gotten their MFA or went to art school, and they have a lot of shoulds, you know. And of course, I was a total neophyte. I didn't know what I was doing, and so I was asking questions and meeting people. And everybody told me, well, you can't start and be an abstract artist. You know, you have to learn how to draw, and you have to learn how to paint real things. And you have to be some people even said you have to be a real artist before you can become an abstract artist. And so in the beginning, I listened to them, and I have piles of around here. I have piles of sketchbooks where I took charcoal portrait drawing classes and nude drawings, and then I did plein air, and then I did so I took classes at the Newport Art Museum, and I took classes at the RISD Extension. I took a lot of workshops, and I then realized that there's something about me. I don't like being constricted. I don't like to plan. I don't like to I like just sort of being very spur of the moment. And the abstract painting really ties in with my personality and who I am. And also, maybe not make commitments, but with especially with acrylic, you never make a commitment because you put something down and you hate it and it dries in 5 minutes and then you paint over it. And so it's really not that big a deal. Or you can scrape it off, or you can scrape into it, or you can. So I gave up trying to become a real artist, and really threw myself into the whole abstract world. I've done tons of workshops in different mediums, like the oil and cold wax. I took a lot of workshops in that. And I like going internationally to take workshops because I love to travel. And I'm probably getting off the topic here, but what influences me really is the travel, the colors, the shapes, the different kinds of palettes that you see, when you go to Paris, it's sort of more of a gray and muted kind of palettes. I went to India in February this year, and my paintings are getting brighter and brighter and brighter because of all of the colors that you see. And so.
I love that. Do you consider yourself neurodivergent or neurotypical?
Neurotypical, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you faced any challenges or setbacks in your art career, and how did you overcome them?
I'm lucky enough that I do not have to totally depend upon my art to provide for me. I try to provide for the studio and through my art and some of my travels and stuff. But I think the hardest part, especially in the beginning when you are working alone and you're constantly, I would go and I'd be in the studio for 8 hours at a time. And then I'd lose momentum and lose then I learned that it's practice. It's, every day is not going to be a good day. And that every day may not be a painting day. It may be a day to do work on social media or on my website or making name tags for the next show so how I've overcome it is sort of one from just a mental set of, you don't have to be making a masterpiece every moment of the day, but also that you can that you have to have patience and that you just go with the flow and then it's important to have a very broad life to be able to be with other people and to not be constantly in the studio.
Alone.
Yeah, alone, yes, yes.
I love that.
I was gonna say that the other thing that ties in a little bit is I teach. And I teach all different in the studio, and I also teach at the Newport Art Museum. And uh, some of it is more process driven, like how do you do oil and cold wax medium. But some of it is come and play and learn how to mix color and make a crazy painting, And I learn so much watching the students as to how they approach it, and get ideas from them.
Wow. Where did you grow up?
My dad was a Foreign Service officer, which meant that we moved around a lot. I was born in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. And then when I was 4, we moved to Tokyo. And when I was 7, we moved to Fukuoka, Japan. And when I was 11, we moved to Falls Church, Virginia. And when I was 15, it was a great time, we moved to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And I went there to school for a year, and then I came back to boarding school in the States. So maybe that's part of this thing of not staying, being willing to try new things and to move on, and it ties in with the personality because, we were only in one place 3 years at a time, and we kept moving. So.
Wow. Where'd you go to high school?
I started at George C. Marshall High School in Falls Church, Virginia, and then I went to the American Community School in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and then I went to Emma Willard School for 2 years.
Wow.
In Troy, New York. I won't say anything more about that experience.
Do you remember doing art when you were a little kid?
Actually, not at all. And my mother passed a couple of years ago, but I had started this second act of mine, and I said, Mom, how come you never got us art classes or anything? And her answer was, it wasn't in our DNA, the family. Art was music. We all had to play an instrument, but my parents didn't do art. There was. And school, as I recall, I don't remember much art going on.
Do you have a favorite colorway for your art? And is the colorway for your art different or the same as the colors in your house?
Do I have a colorway? I have some go-to colorways, I think, one of them is the turquoise, in the turquoise mode. I have a lot of paintings that are turquoisey. And my couch is sort of turquoise. I mean, it's not bright turquoise, but it's sort of turquoisey. And I guess some of the paintings I've chosen to put in at my house of mine have those colors in it too. Since just in the last couple of months, I've got tons of orange and red and um, uh, yellow going on, which is a very, and pink and magenta. And I think that really is the India trip that has influenced me lately. So who knows, that may be my new colorway.
So describe the space where you make your art. Where are we?
So this is a new studio for me. I wanted a space that I could combine both the teaching and a space where I could have almost some social open houses and have people be able to come and go. And at the same time have a working studio that I wouldn't have to disrupt. In my old studio, every time I had a class, I had to take down all of my stuff that I was working on. So I've divided the space into two spaces here. And in the back, looking out at the water, is my painting studio where I do all of the actual painting. And then the room where we're sitting right now are where the students, and then these are all my tables for the students are on wheels, and so I can roll them back and have people. I had shelving put in because unfortunately I have a lot of inventory, a lot of paintings here. And so I'm working hard. I'm getting better. That's maybe my one problem is marketing. But at any rate, I'm getting better about getting myself out there and selling. But so I've got a whole wall of paintings stacked in the shelving. And it's a great new space. It really, it's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice here. How did well, I guess you already answered this in a way, but how did your school system support your interest in art growing up? I think it's interesting to hear a little bit more about how they didn't.
Yeah, I think they didn't. The one thing that especially in the later school years, I took a lot of art history. So, I was always interested in art. And I think that if you understand how different masters do things, and if you really study things, and then I became very enamored with the abstract expressionists of the 50s. But your eye, you develop an eye, but the school system, I'm sure, who knows? I'm sure there was in kindergarten and early years, I'm sure that we had construction paper and made things, but I don't remember it. And I don't, a lot of artists say that they've been doodling and drawing from, they can't not remember when they were doing that. And that is not me. That's definitely not me. I mean, this really is like a crazy story because it's all relatively new in my later years.
I love that. How do you see your work evolving or changing in the future? What do you have planned?
Well, one of the things I did say that I start series and I work in series because I think it's one, and I usually have 5 to 7 paintings going at a time. Because it helps each one informs the next. And I do something on one, I think, ooh, that's cool, let me try that on this one. And so so they usually end up with the same palette or relatively same palette over the series. And I'm thinking about doing this paper series. Couple reasons. One, because paper you can roll up in a tube and ship it easily and sell it easily, and you can price it, because you're not paying a lot of money for the paper. I was talking to my students this week about the fact that there are things about my painting style that I would love to change. I would absolutely, I just love mark making, and I make scribbles, and the paintings become very busy, and they become busier and busier. And then I have to, pare back and try to deconstruct a little bit. And so I would love to be a much more spacious, almost like abstractified landscapes and that kind of thing. I've tried, and it's not me. So, you know, and it may be that I would love, I look at other people and I think, oh, I love that. Oh, I'd love to do that. And you know what? You have to accept who you are and who your style is. And it's your personality. And so it's, so do I have plans? I'm not sure, but I really do try to keep learning and keep, I'm going in October to Mallorca, Spain, for a 8-day workshop. It's abstract artists, and the whole topic is color. And so it's not like an academic color thing. I think it's very much painting. But I'm excited about that because each time you go to one of these things and you see what other people are doing, ooh, let me try that, and then you integrate it into your process.
Oh, I love that so much. Is making art an emotional process for you or a strategic process?
It's definitely emotional. It's purely emotional, and and you can see what kind of a mood I'm in, you know, by what comes out during that day. You can see if I'm angry, or you can see if I'm, you know, very laid back, and, you know, and then all of a sudden pastels come out and you think, not pastels, but pastel colors and very muted. And then the next day it gets covered up and it's red and black and, you know, so it's pure emotion.
Love that. Can you walk us through your creative process from idea to finished piece?
Well, there's no idea ever when I start. I usually line up, I paint on the wall, screws, and I hang the canvases or the panels on the wall. And the first thing I do is I usually start with charcoal, and I just make marks and just sort of ruin the canvases. And then I take a pencil and I'll scribble, and then I'll take another mark making tool. And so it usually starts with that black and white, although sometimes I'll use a colored mark making tool too. Um, and then I take gel medium and I put it over the parts where I've done, so that I can preserve some of the charcoal and the scribbles, and that mushes it. So then it becomes a little bit crazier. And then I think probably the next important decision, at least for that moment in time, is what color am I going to start with? So I don't mix a palette. I don't plan out, you know, this is the palette of the painting. It's purely, okay, I go over and I grab a bottle and I squirt some paint on the palette and then I think, okay, am I going to use a skinny brush or a big fat brush, or, you know, what kind of thing? Sometimes I start, before I make those marks, I might paint the entire canvas like yellow. I hate yellow. I've always avoided yellow like the plague. So now I'm forcing myself. I make the whole canvas yellow, and then I have to react to it and have to cover it up. So I have to do something to it. So, but usually it's a transparent kind of color that I put on just to because that white canvas just sort of it stops you. So messing it up is really important. So I go through, but my process is very much of a layering. And so it's one layer on another, on another, on another. It's oh, you know, I don't, and sometimes I'll make papers in somewhat of a palette that I'm doing using this Carnival, what's it called? Carnival. Anyway, it's tissue paper that doesn't fall apart with paint. And so the parts that you haven't painted on become transparent when you paste it on. So you can make all sorts of things on this paper and then paste it on and see, and so you start, and that creates more layers. And then sometimes especially if I'm working on a board, I may take, I have these pottery tools and screwdrivers, and I might dig back into the layers before to try to see, and then I could, ooh, look at that, and so it's an iterative process. It's a purely instinctual, let my instincts make it happen. I like to say that not always, when I try to push the painting to be something, it ends up being not so good. When I'm in a zone and I'm just letting the painting tell me what to do, I can step back at the end and say, oh my God, I love this. So it's interesting because it really does change the dynamic.
I really love that. How do you combine the art you love to make and the art you sell?
That has been a little bit of a struggle for me because I've changed. There are some artists, like there's one artist in particular I'm thinking of who used to be in a studio where I was, and she made these cute little birds that were like the little birds that are on the sand, you know, that by the water. And she did a couple of those and they sold like hotcakes. Well, that woman is painting frigging birds and has never moved on from the birds because they sell so well, you know. And it's a dangerous, you know, slippery slope, I think, that if you are trying to paint for the consumer, now that's a different story, and you can decide to do that. But if you want to be a creative, I think it's important to try not to paint for what people love, but to paint what you love and then find your people who love what you do.
I hear that. So how do people find your art to purchase? Do you have a website?
I have a website, susanpetreeart.com, and I have, right now I've got over 12,000 followers on Instagram, and I got a bunch of followers on Facebook. I go off and on of, I left Instagram and Facebook. I left social media for 6 months last year because I just was sick and tired of every day feeling like I had to post and I had to, you know, create this kind of thing. I'm back on now, so people can find me, and I try to every once in a while do a video of my process, or do video of my classes, or do video of whatever. Although most of my posts are of the latest paintings I've done or that kind of thing. A little bit of my travels, I guess, but not that much. No personal stuff. So I sell on, people actually find me on Instagram. There's a link in Instagram to my website. You can buy off of my website. I'm starting to think about reaching out to the galleries and to get some galleries to represent me, because I think I'm ready for that. But that's a whole new thing that, do I really want to do that? But you know, yeah.
Well, we'll put that information in the show notes.
Mhm.
Can you share a recent project or a piece of work that you're particularly happy about?
There is a painting, it's over there, that I did very recently. Very recently. And it was one of those paintings that I don't know where it came from. It's a little bit different. It's a different style a little bit than what I usually do. It's got a lot of very bright colors. There's even one, I've had this new thing that is a fluorescent pink, and I thought, I don't know why I bought it, but it was there, and so I started making lines with it, and so now that sort of but then I thought, ooh, it was a lot of orange and magenta, but I thought, and I started putting in some gray greens and so the contrast between Payne's gray, which is one of my most favorite colors in the world. And so putting those colors in contrast to the brightness, and it is like a fusion of spring. I mean, it says to, I mean, I love the painting. I would hang it in my house. And I also think that it shows what happens when you let it fly, let it happen.
Wow, cool. How do you stay motivated as an artist?
That, as I think I said, it's not always easy. And so, what I really try to make it a practice, and to do something every day that sort of pushes me one step further. One of the things lately that has been very helpful, is I've become very involved with the Newport Artist Collective, so I'm around artists a lot more. And I think I don't want it to become where all I'm doing is socializing with artists, but I do think that the discussions that we have and the motivating each other and ideas of, have you thought about this, and getting other people to help to think of, how am I going to market this thing, really helps. I said earlier, my student, this teaching it's really, really good for me, because it forces me, one, to explain what I do and to think about what I do and why I do it. And once right now I'm just doing a class once a week, but then the next day I'm usually more creative and more motivated than I was before.
I love that. Are there any artists or creatives who have influenced or inspired your work?
I think some of the abstract expressionists, very much so. Joan Mitchell is my idol. And in fact, I went to Paris because they were having a show of her work alongside Monet, who was her idol. And so you had the huge Joan Mitchell, and then a Monet lilies, and then it was like, I mean, it was unbelievable, unbelievable. So I think she, of all of them, is. Helen Frankenthaler is another one that I really, really first, and there's another woman who actually got me going first, but I can't remember her name. But yeah, and then I don't follow that many people on Instagram, but I have a number of people I follow because I really like their art. And I, save things that they've done that give me sort of, motivates me, gives me ideas.
Cool. What advice would you give to an aspiring artist looking to pursue a career in the arts?
Number one, try to be you. I think number two, it's not easy. So be ready to, try to do other things as well, because some people are really lucky, but it's a process. And I think also the whole idea that don't wait to be inspired. It needs to be that you need to have a practice, and you need to do it and do it and do it and practice and practice and practice and practice. And half the time or 3/4 of the time it really sucks. And then, and then all of a sudden it blossoms, and then you go through, and it's an ebb and a flow, and it's not anything that is gonna. I think I would wait to reach out to gal instead of trying to immediately try to sell. Make sure that you have a style that is yours and that you've honed and that you like. That's important, that you like. But then I think, unlike me, you should actually reach out and really push to market. Now, of course, if you hadn't had a banking career first, you probably would have more impetus to actually do something about it. But that makes sense.
That's awesome. What is your favorite book, movie, song, podcast?
This, it's so funny. Um, my favorite podcast is, oh, what's the woman who was Elaine on Seinfeld? You know who I'm talking about?
I do.
She has a podcast and she interviews age people my age or older, some few younger, but and it's called Wiser Than Me. And it's fantastic. It's really, really fantastic. Books, there's a book that I tell everybody to read, but of course I lived in Ethiopia, so I love this book, but it's called Cutting for Stone. It's the most beautifully written book. Uh, movies. I'm a big romantic, I love Hallmark movies, sort of like I shouldn't admit that on in public, but I mean, I like, all those rom-coms and that kind of thing. It's just because you know what, especially in this world we're in, it is a pure escapism and it's not serious and I don't have to feel an angst and so.
What music do you listen to?
One musician I listen to a lot because it's very, especially in the studios, is Chris Bodie. He's a trumpet player and he was Sting's trumpet player at one point in time, but he's got some great albums. And it's very moody and a little lyrical, and so you can paint to it. I lately have been listening to playlists that are from the 70s and 80s that are, Amazon or whoever makes them up. But there's so many great songs from that period of time, which is my period. Yeah.
I love that. Is there a book that you recommend to people over and over again that might not be your favorite, but you just think is important?
No.
You're on your own. What do you want to talk about that I didn't ask?
Gosh. You've been pretty fulsome here in terms of the questions. I guess my advice is to just go for it, it makes you happy. It really makes you happy. And get your stuff out there.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for letting us into your studio today.
My pleasure.
I felt inspired for sure. You're super inspirational.
Yeah,
you're amazing.
Thank you.
And much love. And we'll see you next time.
Super.
Yay.
Thank you.